Hi, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how to structure a training block, whether you're doing powerlifting or bodybuilding or just lifting in the gym. It's essential that you are on a training program. If you're just mindlessly going throughout the gym and you're just doing the same weights every week, you don't have a time to deload, you don't have time to push it. That is not the way to go to get optimal progress. So you're going to want to make sure that you are structuring and planning out your workouts. I'm going to talk all about how to do that. Let's just go ahead and hop right into the video. So the first thing to keep in mind when you're planning a training block is your season of fitness. So for me, I just came out of a powerlifting prep. So right now I'm in volume land. I'm in not exerting myself super high RPE land. I'm in just trying to work on weak points, trying to target things that are going to hold me back when I'm on the powerlifting platform. And so everything's much, much lighter than it was last month when I was peaking into my powerlifting competition. So I'm going to give a few examples of what a training progression could look like, and I'll show you from a few different training block vantage points. So linear progression is going to be your most standard approach, where you're starting at a certain weight that's lighter and then you're ending at a certain weight that's obviously much heavier. Depending on the lift, you're going to be making certain jumps week to week, and you're also going to be hopefully using the RPE scale or at least a percentage-based scale so that you're making sure that you're doing appropriate jumps week to week. So one thing I like to do with every training block is I like to set goals where I will start the training block at a certain weight based on where I want to end the training block. So in this training block in particular, I knew that I was going to end at 285 for sets of 5 on deadlift. So I started with 255 and I made 10-pound jumps. So 255, 265, 275, 285. And then on squats, I wasn't sure where I would be at because I hadn't done pause squats in a while, but I started with 185 and I knew that I could either take 5-pound jumps or 10-pound jumps depending on how I was feeling. So I did 195, 205, 210, and then 215. So I took smaller jumps at the end when I realized that I was pushing it too soon in the training block, and I wanted to make sure that I still had room for progression. And on bench, usually I don't have more than a 5-pound jump each week. So if I wanted to end with 145, I needed to start with 130. So 130, 135, 140, 145. And then sometimes you have days where you're feeling a little bit off and you might need to go lighter than you even had planned originally. So that's why the RPE scale is really important. So a good way to look at it would be starting at RP 6 in week 1, RP 7 week 2, RP 8 week 3, RP 9 week 4, or you can even do it more conservative than that, RP 5, RP 6, RP 7, RP 8. Or if you're just trying to do standard baseline where you're not trying to go above a certain RPE, so this was my approach on deadlifts this block, where my coach Kristen, she had me just don't want you to exceed RP 7 on deadlifts. So my range throughout the whole entire training block was not above an RP 7. It was between the sub 5 and 7 range, versus on bench I pushed it a little bit more. I got up to RP 9 by the end. If you're watching this and you're wondering what the heck is an RPE, RPE means rate of perceived exertion, and it stands for the amount of reps that you have left in the tank. So RP 6 is a standard starting weight to start a training block with. RP 6 means 4 reps left in the tank, so you're subtracting the number from 10. RP 7 would be 3 reps left in the tank, RP 8 2 reps left in the tank, RP 9 1 rep left in the tank, RP 10 means absolute utter brink of failure. What I typically see in commercial gyms is people are training to the utter brink of failure, or they're not training hard enough at all. Usually men, you'll see them going to the utter brink of failure, and then you see women going way, way, way too easy, where it's like you could push yourself a little bit more. So you want to be starting on the lighter end where you have 4 solid reps left in the tank. Usually that's like a generalization, and at the end you want to end with like 1 rep left in the tank-ish. You don't want to go to the utter brink of failure always, especially not in week 1. So it really depends on the season of fitness that you're in, but overall main takeaway is you definitely need to have some sense of backing off, making sure there's a time where you're going lighter and a time where you're going to push it. So sometimes I end up peaking my training block too early, where in week 3 that's my heaviest, then I'll need to deload in week 4, whereas sometimes I have a straight up linear approach where I'm able to keep jumping up week to week. So this training block in my off season, I was able to do that, thankfully. Did not overshoot my RPs too crazy to where I peaked too early, but sometimes when I'm in a powerlifting prep and I'm in a strength block or in a peaking block, I'll get too overly ambitious and then I'll end up needing to phase it out, where I kind of go up and then down and then up again. So it's nice to have number goals, but it's also good to have the RPE system to keep yourself in check, to make sure that you're not pushing yourself to the utter brink of failure just because you need to get to a heavier number than you did last week. So most of what I've been talking about so far has been just in regard to the main lifts, so the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. That's where the main focus is if you're a power lifter. You're looking at your top sets, you're hoping to be stronger week to week to week. But when it comes to accessories, like the lat pull down, the reverse lunge, or just potentially even some variation lifts to your main movements like a Larson bench, you might not be getting the same sense of progression. So for example, my Larson bench, I did 105 for sets of 8 for the first 2 weeks and then 110 for sets of 8 for the next 2 weeks. But then my lat pull downs on the other end, I just stuck with the same weight the entire training block. So I didn't do, I did 100 pounds the entire time. I think I managed to get a little bit more reps by the end, but I'm sticking with the same RPE-ish range. So about RP 7 to 8 on those upper body accessories and then RP 6 to 7 on the lower body accessories, but I still do have goals to progress them. So usually upper body might not be necessarily an increase in weight, but an increase in reps throughout the block. And then lower body, I might be able to progress week to week. For example, on my front foot elevated split squats, I started with 55 or 50s, and then I did 55s, and then I did 60s. And then I noticed that I was experiencing some adductor tightness because I wasn't used to the movement. So I dialed it back and made sure it didn't exceed 60s, but next block I'll definitely be able to go up to 65s. But I want to make sure that I'm pushing myself, making sure there's some sense of progression, but you're not trying to overly exert yourself to where you're not able to recover properly. So recovery is a super important element to progressing in your strength progress or just bodybuilding progress, whatever type of lifting progress you're looking to go toward. So I've kind of talked about the overall structure in terms of the top sets, making sure you have specific goals to where you're progressing, whether that's with weight or with an RPE scale or with a percentage. And then I've also talked about the accessories, how you're either trying to increase more reps or more weight, but that might not necessarily be the priority, especially if you're on a powerlifting program, but it still is the goal overall to lift more on both your top sets and your accessories. And you have times where you phase it down, times where you push it. So typically week 1 is the lightest, week 2 gets a little bit heavier, week 3 gets a little bit heavier, week 4 is the heaviest. And then you might need to have a deload week if you pushed it really, really hard, or if you inappropriately gauged how much you could push it, you might need to phase your weeks. Like I've also done undulating weeks before, where especially on deadlifts where I get really fatigued, where it's just every other week. So it would be a light week in week 1, a heavier week in week 2, light week in week 3, heavier week in week 4. So that can be kind of a way to manage it if you pushed yourself too early and you're not feeling fully recovered, but you also don't want to just start over from scratch. But if you're still not sold, ask yourself this: are you making the progress that you want to? Are you getting stronger? Are you getting the results just by going in and doing random things? If that's the case, then cool. That means that you have really good intuitive awareness with what you should do with your workouts. But I'm gonna say that is, unless you're like a really, really high level athlete and you've been doing this for years and you can kind of intuitively put yourself in check and you're still obviously writing down your weight and tracking it, I'm gonna guess that's 99.99% of the time not true. So definitely get on program if you're not already. There's lots of free programs online. Like I mentioned, I do have a coach who does my powerlifting program. I program for my husband, which is helpful for him. He used to not do programs and now he does, which is, and he's gotten a lot more progress since then, so that's great. I also have an example of a program that I will leave below. I've also done personal training for years, so I've trained a lot of different types of clients, where it might be for powerlifting goals or aesthetic goals or for injury prevention, but it's important for everyone, no matter what phase of fitness you're in, to have a training block. So if you're not on a training block after this video, make sure that you definitely are. But anyways, that's all for today's YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching. This was a fun training block. I'm really enjoying being in the off season and lifting lighter and giving my body a break from that top end strength. But my goal is still to hopefully compete in the summertime. If not summer, if there's not a local meet in my area, then I'm gonna do fall or winter, but definitely sometime this year. But anyways, let me know if there's anything else you want me to talk about in future videos. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.